Now, finally, we've reached the end. The sun is setting, so I think it's time to wrap this presentation up with some light orphan commentary as fast as possible, and then the conclusions. So orphaning is intimately related to our two highlighted issues, bandwidth and the fee market. It's intimately related to Bitcoin itself as well as Byzantine fault tolerance, which I won't explain. This is another graph from Peter R., arguing that orphan blocks tend to be bigger blocks, and he took this supply view that I neglected earlier. This supply view here, this middle one that I didn't explain. I actually agree with this view, but I'm inserting this concept and arguing that it's incentive compatible. But I'm dismissing this view, and so let's talk about why. Here I've highlighted, I think, the argument, which is that there's a difference between main chain blocks and orphan blocks vertically, in that they tended to be larger by various amounts, but in general it seems that there was some positive distance here. So I'm just going to remind you of my arguments for that SPV mining can eliminate orphaning. And I also rejected that orphan costs had a significant effect on supply, which was part of that supply view. So let's look at some data from blockchain.info. This is the number of orphan blocks averaged over 2 days. Pay attention to this n equals 2 because it's going to change. This is the number of blocks. And I've highlighted 2 days for you so you can see it as I change n equals 2 to 28, which is a sort of similar recreation of the Peter R. graph, although his graph had size on the y-axis and mine just has the number of blocks which were orphaned. And as you can see, this orphaning phenomenon began, and then it started to be kind of fought here. At some point here around January 2016, the number of orphan blocks fell and began to fall. And for fun, we can set this to average 200 days. And you can see that there's no orphaning at all. This is a little biased because there's a lot of these are being averaged with the tons of zeros. So this whole graph is being pulled down since it's upward sloping. But you can see that orphaning was not a thing until 2014, 2015. And now in 2016, it's going away somehow. And this is despite blocks which are bigger than ever. So here's block size n equals 28, 28 average. Same exact dates. Block size was very low, and it's been increasing ever since. And now here's the same n equals 200. Just to show you I'm not pulling a fast one on you with this weird n. The blocks are bigger than ever. So just very quickly, I'm just going to rush. There are some orphaning conclusions. Around March 2014, blocks surged past 1/5 of a megabyte for the first time. And around that time, orphaning started to increase significantly. Point number 2, it is known that some miners were SPV mining in July 2015 because there was an unexpected chain split at that time related to poorly implemented SPV mining. Furthermore, around that time, around July 2015, orphaning decreased sharply despite blocks that were bigger than ever. But if size is supposed to cause blocks to be more orphaned, how can the blocks be getting bigger and orphaning be going down? So I think the likely culprit is SPV mining, and I think that this supports my view that SPV mining can eliminate orphaning. And I have a note here that during the worst 200-day period, the orphan rate averaged 1.5 per day over a 200-day period, of course. But that's 1% at worst. So I think orphaning is a small transient phenomenon being fixed by SPV mining. We've reached the conclusion slide that I promised you from the very beginning. Again, the great thing about sidechains is they don't have a lot of risks. If you don't like Google Chrome, you don't have to install it or run it. If you don't like Mozilla Firefox, you don't have to install that or run that either. So in general, the bulk of the safety is actually here in the very concept of the sidechain itself. It does affect, however, the shared mining experience. Namecoin has been merged mined by over half of the Bitcoin mining network for over 5 years, I think. So no one has been complaining about that, but I anticipate that someone would object to this argument by claiming that Namecoin is small and irrelevant and no one cares about Namecoin. At which point I would proceed to my other objections, namely that there's very little that miners can do to harm you at all. The decentralization comes from the fact that anyone can mine at any time. And if mining power gets shut off, new mining power can come in. And that we can even start over by changing the proof of work algorithm, and we can just let the network regenerate itself slowly if necessary by waiting for more confirmations. But in general, mining is a very safe kind of reaction. It's just a slow settlement of history into an immutable chain. But you might say, okay, maybe you, Paul Sztorc, are not worried about mining, but I am. And so again, I dissect the effects as being primarily related to bandwidth and fees, and I attempted to derive an equilibrium result for how sidechains would affect fees, and I concluded that they would actually maximize fees. The opposite result of what maybe some people were expecting. And then the bandwidth side, I note that SPV mining can flip a weird incentive glitch in Bitcoin mining. SPV mining supplies most of what miners need from the network in order to mine. They do also need transactions, and an entire suite of technologies is currently being worked on to bring that right up to 100%. So I'm very optimistic about the risks being extremely low. And I'd just like to thank anyone who listened through this entire rambling speech. It is intended for a small audience of sidechain skeptics. I guess it's time to end this presentation. Thanks to Jeff. You can't see this is the pencil version of the block logo. You see it's a pencil version of this slide. Anyway, thanks to him for letting me spend some time on this. I hope that you enjoyed this and that you learned a lot about Bitcoin and sidechains and Bitcoin scalability. And until next time.